Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. I'd like to thank Furby House Books in Port Hope for their ongoing support. This partnership allows us to continue to bring virtual author visits to the Cobourg Public Library and our community, and we encourage you to shop locally and visit your local public library. Today, we have the pleasure of interviewing Kelley Armstrong. By way of an introduction, I'm going to share Kelley's bio from her website, which I love. It's filled with humor and humility, so I'll share that with you today. Kelley believes experience is the best teacher, though she's been told this shouldn't apply to writing her murder scenes. To craft her books, she has studied Aikido, archery, and fencing. She sucks at all of them. She has also crawled through very shallow cave systems and climbed half a mountain before chickening out. She is, however, an expert coffee drinker and a true connoisseur of chocolate chip cookies. I'm sure many of us can relate to those two things. Today, we have the pleasure of talking about Kelley's latest release, The Poisoner's Ring, Book 2 in the Rip Through Time series. In the book, a modern-day homicide detective is working as an undertaker's assistant in, get this, Victorian Scotland, when a serial poisoner attacks the men of Edinburgh and leaves their widows under suspicion. Our host, once again, is the lovely Ashley Pimenter, who has interviewed countless authors on behalf of the Cobourg Public Library. We are grateful, as always, for her keen insight and her willingness to explore books with us. Not only is Ashley an avid reader, she creates and supports programming to support the kids who are part of the Girl Guides of Canada. She is also the co-chair of the Red Maple Awards Steering Committee and writes reviews for the Canadian Children's Book News. Welcome, Kelley and Ashley.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. Hello, readers. So nice to talk to you again. And I'm so excited for this interview, especially to talk about A Rip Through Time and The Poisoner's Rings, predominantly The Poisoner's Rings. I'm trying to gesture through my screen. I'm going backwards. And we are here with Kelley Armstrong today. Kelley has written over 60 books and is actually one of the first times that we get to talk to someone who writes as a series author. So far, all the other authors that we've talked to have written like one-offs or do one big deep dive. And so it's really exciting to talk to you today a little bit about your process and how you create all the wonderful worlds that you create. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay, so as I said, you're one of the first series authors that we've had the chance to talk to, including this newest one. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your thinking and your planning and your writing process to give our readers and our authors a peek behind the page as to how you create the series that you do.
Okay, so I'll talk about this series in particular. It's a new one, which makes that much easier because after you've written a bunch of series and someone says, hey, what was the impetus for this series? Sometimes I can be like, I have forgotten. So this one's easy. So I had this idea years ago. I thought, I like time travel. I love historical mysteries. I thought I'd love to do something where modern day detective goes back in time. Problem is, I don't write historical fiction. And as much as I read it, I'm terrified of writing it because there's so much to get right. Like every last word choice I can agonize over. Did they use that word not only in that time period, but in that location? So part of it is letting go a little bit of that terror and saying, I'm going to screw up. I'm absolutely going to make mistakes. And all I can do is say, I've done my best. I have if you look on my website, you will see a massive bibliography of both firsthand account, primary sources and secondary sources for this. So I was going along. I actually did write a different time travel one that is more romancy, ghosts, more the sort of thing that I normally do. That was my test run. I was like, if I can do this and readers don't say, stay away from historical Kelley, I might be ready for something that's tougher. So yeah, so then This was sold. This was sold just before the pandemic started, and I decided to set it in Scotland because Scotland it was a little women's rights were a little better there. They don't have coverture at that time, which coverture was the English common law that said when you married, you are under you the two become one and the one is the man, so everything is the man. You can't do anything, you cannot inherit, you cannot divorce, you cannot do have your own anything really, because it all belongs to your husband. That's a much tougher world for me. Also, I wanted to deal with medical. The main character is a doctor who's had become an undertaker, but does early forensics. Edinburgh was perfect for that. I had a chance to go to one of these big, massive signings in Edinburgh. It was scheduled for 2020. So I sold this in 2019, started doing all of my research, going, I'll be able to go and see the city in 2020. I think it was like May, June. Like this is perfect. It all worked out. I could write the book, then go and fill in all of these gaps. As we know, that did not happen. The signing was rescheduled for 2021. Now, the book was then due to come out 2021. So no, 2022. Sorry, I've lost track of what year we are in. 2022. I thought, okay, I still have time to fix things in proofs or copy edits. There's still time there because it's spring. It's 1 year. I have time. It was canceled in 2021 and moved to 2022 the same week that the book came out. So I luckily I went on to my social media and said, if I have any readers who are in Edinburgh who would, be okay with reading this in return for early read and some other little goodies. And I had four people who thankfully read it. I have now been to Edinburgh twice since then, but that was a really bad timing.
Oh, that's hilarious. It's fascinating the hoops that writers jump through to create the imaginative process and to really just like chase that idea. Elizabeth Gilbert has a great way of describing like that ideas just come to you and you just have to embrace it and go with the creative process wherever it takes you. And I really loved that it was set in Scotland and it was something different. And also readers, for those of you who are not like you maybe on the fence about historical fiction, this is the perfect entry book to that, because it really marries the present and the past in a beautiful way. And I am smitten with Mallory. I absolutely adore her. And so like one of the things I really love about your writing in general is that you do also like, you have this tendency to take a common genre and then flip it a little bit and add these like unique twists that we never would. So one of the other series that you've written recently and that your readers here may also be familiar with are the Rockton series and the new one, The Murder in Havens Rock. I'm a big fan of the Rockton ones as well. And I was wondering, like, how do you take these ideas where you're like, okay, I'm going to write a PI type detective type novel, but I'm not going to write the standard one. I'm going to write something entirely different. So Rockton's set in the Yukon. And you've got these ones which are set in 1869. Thank you. And so like, it's just this, like, how do you approach this where you're like, okay, I'm going to take this thing and then I'm going to flip it on its head. How do you do that? You also did it with your, for those who may be familiar with your fantasy work, you did this as well in the Women of the Otherworld series as well.
Yeah, so for Rockton, it was actually a bit of a reverse there because I definitely know where the idea for that came from. My agent at the time we were just talking, and she would occasionally throw out these tidbits, these like trivia bits for me. And she said she had heard or read that enough people go missing every year to populate a small town. And that gets my brain going, what if there was a small town? What if there was a small town of people who have intentionally gone missing? They have said, I have to get away. And then I started thinking, okay, so then it becomes genre, right? Which genre would work best for this? You could do fantasy, you could do romance, you could do, but none of those really seemed like they're the right fit. The right fit, if these people are all escaping something, the obvious right fit is mystery, thriller. So then it becomes, where is this town? And I had been to Northwest Territories, and I'd been to Alaska, and I'm like, Alaska is more where I want, or more the scenery that I want, more wilderness. But I'd rather it was in Canada. And so luckily we have our own version, which is just to the like east of that. So yeah, going up there and doing all of that and saying, yeah, certainly I don't think there's any place in the world where you could hide a town, but if you could, that would be it. We're talking Yukon being the size of a Texas with a population of under 40,000 people. So if you could, if you had some technology to help you, because there's all the reasons why you couldn't, but can I make you believe that you could have this small town where the Yukon seemed like a good bet? And then you start spinning into, what type of character? Do I have somebody who is already there? No, I want somebody who can come in and bring the readers into it as a new person. And okay, and what if she also has a reason why she needs to go there? So it is more or less with that type of thing, coming up with, how would this work, and what would give me the most meat for it? Like, what genre, what type of character, what location could I do that would let me play the most with it? So the fact that it ends up being different, it ends up being this weird kind of like locked room mystery thing, was almost accidental. It's more taking this interesting concept and then spinning it until I have a series idea.
I love that. And I love your humility into being like, this is an accident. Like sometimes we just like an idea just like unwinds in such creative ways. It gives our like aspiring authors, and we have Northumberland County has quite an independent writing community. So it gives them just like that little bit to like grab onto and be like, yeah, chase an idea, see where it goes. And then you'll end up with something wonderful.
Definitely, yeah.
Similar to these ones. I love that you brought up that it's like a locked room in a small town, and it's a perfect way to describe it. And these ones, like for those who may be a little bit reluctant hearing the word thriller, they're not like the type of thriller that's just going to give you nightmares. Don't worry, you're all good. You're going to love it. It's just going to pull you along. You're going to stay up way past your bedtime, and then you're going to just like be thrilled that you did. And one of the things like you also brought in is that you've created these characters that have such a wonderful way, both Mallory and this one. And I've blanked on the Rockton character. Listen,
Casey.
Thank you. And Casey in the Rockton one, you've brought us into these worlds through these like characters who give us wonderful entry points. But the best thing one of the things I love is that it's in all of your books, all of your characters are fleshed out. There's no one there who's just like holding a spot, especially in your primary and secondary characters. And one of the things that challenges a lot of aspiring authors is, how do you create this fleshed out human being that feels real when you read it? And readers, Mallory feels entirely real, and you're on for this ride with her. And there are times when you feel as if you are her in those positions. And it's wonderful. She presents them in such fantastic ways. You present them, and Mallory in the book, to separate the two. And so I was wondering what advice you would share about the ways that you build out your main and secondary characters.
Yeah, and that was a big thing for me early in my career. Now, I've been writing since I was a child, but the types of writing that you do as a child or a teen are different. You're still working out narrative. I was working into learning a dialogue, setting, plot. Character tends to sort of fall behind a bit. So I was working on novels, and I had somebody have a look at one of my novels, and the biggest thing that they said was, your characters are two-dimensional. They were very high on everything else. So if I'm going to get someone saying all of this is great except this one thing, I'm going to dive into, how do I fix that? And there's lots of advice out there on how to fix it, but what worked for me best was seeing this diagram of a pyramid shape with like 10%, 90%, and it was that this is the whole pyramid is the sum total of what you know about a given character. The 10% is what you're telling the reader in that book. And this was a big eye-opener for me, because mine would have been more flipped. It would have been like, if I don't need it for this book, why do I know it? Like I filled out the character enough to function in that book, which makes them two-dimensional. So getting to that where you can then say, no, I need to know so much more. I need to know things about Mallory. I need to know things about Duncan, about Isla, about Hugh, about Simon, going all the way down the line, Alice, that are not going to make it into this book, that might not make it into book 2, 3, 4, but they sometimes can, where I will then, it'll naturally come up when you're talking about, in A Poisoner's Ring. And I think Isla's talking about Annis and when they were kids and things that she, did. I knew that. So when it came up naturally, instead of forcing to find a place for it, only use what comes naturally, and it makes that character seem so much more three-dimensional because it feels as if they already had this background, which human beings do have this background, and we are the sum total of our experiences, positive, negative, whether we want to be or not. So knowing what a character's backstory is, how they grew up, what their relationships were, even if they don't ever come into the book, I think really helps me flesh out those characters.
That's fantastic. That's really helpful to just like see that bit of pictures. And you're totally right. As you're describing it, I was like, oh yes, like they worked so naturally through this. Cannot recommend these two books enough. Like, don't just read this one, read both. Start with the first one. This is like, you'll be hooked. I don't usually read series back to back, and these ones I was like, nope, pick up the second one. Let's keep going. This is so good. So readers, like, in for a delight. And you can definitely see that it shines through in your writing. And that's such great advice for everyone. Get to know them as if they were people. That's wonderful. One of the things like you just described is that you've been writing since you were a kid. But what our readers might not know is that you also write for children. You write for 9 to 12, you write for YA, you write adult, you write a little bit of everything. And actually, I was introduced to your writing through YA, actually. And so when I found out you wrote adult fiction, I was like, what? That doesn't happen very often, where usually like YA people come and they're like, and they live there. And you're like, I can write anything. And I'm curious, like, how do you switch between your audiences when you're writing different pieces? And like, what advice would you have on that one as well, of like, how do you just like take that idea and figure out who it's the right fit for?
And it really is character. It comes down to like, you not saying I want to write a young adult novel so much as I have an idea and what age group does this fit? But an age group, not of readers so much as of characters. Like, what age group of characters works the best? My last middle grade, it's a quadrilogy, 4 books, but it originally started life in my head as a YA, and I wrote 5,000 words of it, and it wasn't working. And I put it aside. At some point, I always say, I really enjoyed that. So I go back, I try again, not working. Took a few years, and I just had out of nowhere the idea, what if instead of being 17, she was 12? And I went, this works so much better. It doesn't have to be as dark. I don't have to have, because I was not coming up with, you often in a YA have the, new romances and stuff. And I was like, that was not gelling for me in the way that the character and her family was. Character, family, friends. And if I'd thought about it, character, family, friends is middle grade. They're still very close to their family, starting to move away, friends becoming way more important. YA is more, you're further from your family, friends are vitally important, and maybe you're starting to look romantically. So really, the concept fit middle grade so much better. And of course, those 5,000 words had to be totally rewritten, but once I knew that this was a middle grade character, like preteen character, it went so much better.
Oh, that's perfect. And also, for those of you who have younger readers at home and you're looking for a recommendation for summer reading, The Royal Guide to Monster Slaying.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. That's the series that we're talking about. And it's wonderful. It's great for kids who are entering fantasy and are looking for like strong, awesome characters. And I highly recommend that's a great summer read for your younger readers. If you're looking for something to take to the cottage so that you can both read, you take Poisoner's Ring, they take The Royal Guide to Monster Slaying, and you've got quiet for hours. Highly recommend it. taking us off as I like pitch all your other books. Uh,
I'm okay with that.
Love it. Love it. It's fun to also talk to an author who has these varieties, because this is one of the first times we've been able to sort of reach the whole family in our reading, with the exception, I don't believe you've written any picture books yet. I'm
Nope.
saying yeah, because it'll happen one day. Who knows? And that was just such great advice about, like, again, getting to know your character. And those of you who are like a little bit reluctant to try a new age group, this may be your in to being like, oh, maybe it turns out that writing middle grades is actually what I love. And this is a better fit for what my idea is. So kudos to the exploration and the accidental like falling into things. So I've got one final question for you that I'd love to have like a little bit of insight into your writing process. So what does like your average day or week look like as someone who actually like writes as their profession?
And yeah, and I always preface this by saying, everybody's process is different. So what I love about hearing authors' processes, and what I think helps writers, is knowing that this is a range that you can pick and choose from. You can say, yes, that works for me, or say that would not work for me. And I know many writers whose process is the literal opposite of mine. But these are New York Times bestselling authors. I mean, they are doing just as well, but they're doing it differently. So my former career was coding. I was a programmer. So project management, my brain works really well on what people consider non-writery things, but there's plenty of science folks in, writing. So I have, to-do lists and spreadsheets, and that's what works for me, knowing, okay, this book is going to be 100,000 words long. I roughly write 10,000 words a week, and I can literally plot it out, also plot editing of other books in, plot everything in. I do my daily, so a writing day for me is get up, take it easy. I often do editing in the morning because I'm a little sleepy. I used to write, but now I sort of edit. Now that the kids are grown, which really helps, because before early morning was so quiet that writing made sense, right? But now it's editing. Ease into it. Edit in the mornings, do some businessy stuff, afternoons, writing.
That's wonderful. And it's like, I like that you brought in your other world and your other experiences, because we have to bring all those things in order to create such wonderful pieces. Thank you, Kelley, so much for your openness and just like bringing us into your worlds and continuing to build such wonderful pieces for us to all enjoy. Thank you so much, Cobourg Public Library, for having us. They're so much fun.
Thank you, Kelley. Thank you, Ashley. Wonderful tips on writing and a great entree into Kelley's work. Just amazing. Lots of great conversations and good things for our audience to dive into. So thank you both for your time and for sharing your insights. That's great. The Poisoner's Ring is available for loan at the Cobourg Public Library. There is quite a lengthy hold list, I will let you know, but eventually your turn will come up. So go ahead, put that hold on, and eventually we will give you a call so you can read it. It's also available for purchase at Furby House in Port Hope. So, you could go out and purchase a copy if you're so inclined. We want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our audience for listening in, and we hope to see you again next time.